this one. So then on the left, you see that the high resolution map is on top of the seaport bathymetry map. And you see these ridges A, B, and C, they trends nearly north to northeast direction that are up to about 300-meter wide and about 400-meter high. So along this ridge A, unfortunately, we don't have any high resolution bathymetry data, but this ridge is explored by this ROV dive track along the length. So as we go up along this dive track, so in location 14, you see a sigmoidal scale structure that dips in the south to southwest direction. And location 15, you see 3 to 5 meter spaced planar fractures structures. And then at location 16, we see that localized gouge and microbrachia zones that are surrounded by highly fractured outcrops. And then we see these kind of ridges which are trending in the east-west direction, which are marked as 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this map, we explore the north-facing slope of one of these ridges, and at location 17, you can see the east-west, nearly east-west trending ridge, and the north-facing surface of this ridge of this slope contains non-cohesive fault gouge. And at location 18, we see finally the north dipping fault plane, and which is antithetic to the main detachment fault plane. So these are the antithetic fault planes which can be traced in the seaport bathymetry data for a length of 5 kilometers. And then on continuation on the dive track, as we move upslope, we again start observing exposures of south dipping detachment fault zone and very nice outcrops of south dipping sigmoidal structure, for example, at location 19 and at location 20. So, but here, one thing to point out is that till now, we see a very little thickness of microbrachia and gouge bearing horizons. And next, I will show you high resolution map and outcrops along this drive track where we have high resolution bathymetry data. So here, panel B and panel C, you can see the exposure of the fault surface with locally developed corrugations, and the detachment fault surface is cut by those east-west, nearly east-west trending antithetic faults, which has a max offset for 50 meters. And next, we will move closer to the emergence area here. And here you notice that the emergence stress in this map has a undulations which are in decameter to hectometer scale. And on the upper left corner of this high resolution map here, you see the corrugation structures. And outcrop at location 12, which is related to this corrugated fault surface, is showing mainly brittle brachia domains. And at the bottom right corner on the map, you see this seafloor is smooth, though and nearly planar and non-corrugated as well. But unfortunately, the ROV dive didn't go there. But the surrounding area of this non-corrugated domain has been explored. And for example, at location 9, you can see a, a, thin, a thick layer of gouge bearing microbrachia domain, which appears white in color, which covers the entire outcrop. And next, we will see more localized deformation structures from this non-corrugated domain, which will be located in this part of the map. So on this non-corrugated domain, outcrops at location 2 shows that these intercalated horizons of ultramafic brachia, microbrachia, and gouge-bearing zones, they are variably thick from here. Example, from about 1 meter to at outcrops about 7 meter. So for that, I will show you the later images. And in location 3, indicates that these highly deformed horizons are not only distributed at the top of the fault, but they are distributed in between horizons of less deformed rock masses. So, and this photograph at location 4 here, which shows a continuous serpentine shear zone structure throughout the outcrop. And below this shear zone, you see fracture branching. They are also filled with similar white materials, which indicates enhanced fluid circulation along these fractures and which likely promotes enhanced serpentinization and strain localization. So, and then we see this spectacular 8-meter high scarp exposing again intercalated horizons of ultramafic brachia, microbrachia, and Gauss bearing zones. And where we sampled this very nice foliated microbrachia sample, and this is an optical microscope photograph of the sample in which you see the shear domain can be traced throughout the sample, and in between you have pockets or areas of clast rich domain. So next we will see in detail which are this shear domain and the clast rich domain are made up of. Oops. Okay, so this is a backscattered image from this clast rich domain which shows here, which shows evidence for clastoclastic brachiation with a clast of mesh texture serpentine and olivine. And Raman spectral analysis from the mesh core and mesh rings indicates that they are made up of lizardite. And here, the occurrence of mesh texture serpentine in the matrix indicates that brittle deformation happens after the serpentinization process. And you see these darker gray areas with microclast, which I will come on later again. But before that, we will see microstructures from this highly sheared area. So this is an optical light microphotograph from the sheared domain, which is located here. And using an wave plate, we are able to see a strong crystallographic orientation of the fabric. And this zoomed area, which is a BSC image from here, shows that we have a sigmoidal clast like this. We have elongated clast, which are shape, which show shape preferred orientations, and we have sigmoidal clast, which are deforming in the matrix, and we have domains where we see very microclast, and we have domains where we see no clast. So Raman spectral analysis shows that these fibers in the matrix, which are deformed crystal plastically, they are dominantly made of chrysotile. And you also see clast like this, which have a mixed Raman spectrometric signature of chrysotile plus lizardite. And so, so here you see an BSC image from the same clast core domain, and you see in this image a island of clast rich area which is surrounded by clast core matrix. A more closer look on this clast rich area, uh, we see that this area is made up of microcrystalline cataclastic microbrachia domain, and the surrounding area, which is relatively clast 4, they are made up of sheared serpentine. And sorry, and then so previously we saw that these darker gray areas represent highly sheared serpentine, and here this textural evidence shows that this sheared serpentine with very micro shears is cross-cutting the cataclastic microbrachia domain. And once these micro sheared horizons are created, so they promote further strain localization after the process of brachiation. And with progressive deformation, these micro sheared horizons would likely become millimeter scale shear zone like this, with islands of clast rich areas remain in the behind. And here on the left side of the image, I show you other examples of highly deformed outcrops from where these microbrachia samples were collected. And on the right side, you see carbonated serpentine brachia sample from the old city area. And By the way, one point to remember that is these gouge-bearing microbrachia domains in some areas make a very large thickness. For example, here up to 8 meter, which is located here, and in other cases, the dominant deformation is mostly characterized by sigmoidal structures with much thinner intervals of gouge-bearing horizon. For example, here. And now I'm going to show you a systematic study of these highly deformed some serpentine samples throughout the area for which the samples are located here. Okay, and in this slide, you see a collection of microphotographs from the samples so in the top row. And these BSE images have similar scale. So the second row shows that every sample contains microcrystalline cataclastic microbrachia domains, and in which the cluster sizes are very much comparable. And the third row, in the third row shows that from the domains from the highly sheared areas where chrysotile fibers are crystalloplastically deformed. So these textural similarities between the sample most likely indicates very similar type of strain localization process as illustrated before. And but here one additional texture to note that in sample 64828, which is this one, that the microprobe analysis of some of the clinopyroxene clasts shows that they contain high weight percentage of titanium oxide, which indicates that these CPA clasts are derived from the magmatic rocks. So as you can see in this particular sample, where comes from the area where we have volcanic ridge on the bathymetry data, and we see gabbroites, faulted gabbroites on the detachment fault zone. So in this sample, we also notice that local replacement of ring, which is replaced by chloride of a serpentine clast. And the microprobe analysis shows that this sheared serpentine matrix in this particular sample, where we see the gabbroites, it contains higher amount of alumina oxide compared to the rest of the samples. So this indicates alumina-rich fluid circulation during the process of deformation. So here the cartoons illustrates the similarities of the structures from sample to outcrop to kilometer scale detachment fault zone. So in the sample scale, which shows a variably thick and thin, highly sheared domain with variable clast sizes, which forms a block in the matrix texture. And at the outcrop scale, we also observed variably thick sheared domain with variably sized blocks of yes, and similarly at the kilometer scale fault zone, we expect sigmoidal blocks like this will be of several hundreds of meter wide and long. This cartoon shows anatomy of several hundred. Okay, so this cartoon shows anatomy of several hundreds of meter thick fault damage zone, but I will not go into the detailed mechanics of it, but note this greener and yellow shades of the fault zone, which I will discuss later. So now the obvious question comes that what was the deformation conditions? So far we have seen evidence for brittle deformation of already serpentinized peridotite with lizardite mesh core and rim texture, and we see recrystallized chrysotile fiber that are deformed crystalloplastically, and we see local metasomatic replacement of serpentine clast by chloride. And we know that the chrysotile and lizardite are stable under 400 degrees Celsius. And in this BSE image, which is experimentally deformed chrysotile and polygonal serpentine gouge at room temperature, you can see that texturally it is very similar to these tectonically damaged samples in our study area. Thus, this deformation texture can be formed in a wide range of lower green schist facies temperature conditions, but we do not have any information on the depth of the deformation, at what depth the deformation is occurring. So here I illustrate that the difficulty is that we cannot relate temperature with the depth for particular two reasons. One is that we don't have a actual geotherm in the area, and if the thermal gradient is purely conductive linear gradient like this, we saw with the red that dashed line, uh, but this could be also wrong because we know that our sample deformed in the presence of hydrous fluid. So when we have fluid, it means that we are in a place where fluids can go down or perhaps can go up. So through our sample, from our sample, so it doesn't look like that we have a very active hydrothermal circulation in the area. But still, if the deformation is happening in an area with an upflow, then the depth of deformation zone could be much shallower at 300 degrees Celsius temperature. And alternatively, if the deformation is happening in an area where the fluids can go down, then the depth of deformation could be much deeper. So to summarize the outcrop scale structure, we see the absence of corrugations in related to the overall weaker cerebral rheology of the emerging fault in the in the non-corrugated domain compared to the purely corrugated domain, which is mostly deformed suborbital deformation. And these two domains represent damage zone developed in very distinct conditions of temperature and hydrothermal fluidability, which I show an illustration as here, which is dominated by viscous deformation, and here the damage zone is dominantly deformed by brittle deformation. So, and the key points are that the dominant deformation mechanism is brittle type deformation of already serpentinized peridotite, and zinc tectonic hydrous fluid infiltration in the brittle cracks at meter to decameter scale promotes zinc tectonic recrystallization of chrysotile in the microbrachia and foliated gouge bearing horizons that are up to 10-meter thick, enhancing the strain localization. And these results are to be contrasted with the deformation structures documented from the more magmatic mid-Atlantic detachment fault systems based on very similar studies where they observed that the strain localization is always associated with minerals such as talc, chloride, and amphibole, which are the product of hydrous alteration of gabbro-peridotite mixtures or alteration by silica-rich metasymmetric fluid. But in our case, we don't see this kind of minerals, so it's dominantly deformed by serpentine species of minerals. Thank you.